A homeless veteran had just $8 left to his name, 8 crumpled bills that represented his entire fortune. Enough for maybe 3 days of food if he rationed carefully. But that same night, under the glow of city lights, Jerome Caldwell made a choice that no one could have predicted. Instead of buying food, instead of clinging to survival for one more day, he spent his last $8 to save the life of a billionaire collapsing on the street. Cameras captured the moment. And what Jerome didn't know was that this single decision, one act of instinct and sacrifice, would ignite a storm so powerful it would rattle Congress, shake the pharmaceutical industry, and change the future of medicine forever. His name was Jerome Caldwell, and his story didn't begin on that sidewalk. To understand how a man ends up with nothing but $8 in his pocket, you have to go back. 5 years earlier, Jerome was not a shadow, not a face hidden under the weight of poverty. He was an EMT, racing through city streets in an ambulance, saving lives in the chaos of sirens and flashing lights. He was good at it. Steady hands, quick judgment, the kind of man you wanted beside you when every second mattered. 10 years earlier, he was in Afghanistan, a combat medic in the middle of war. His job was simple and impossible. Drag the wounded through gunfire, keep them alive with grit and improvisation, and pray you could buy enough time for the helicopter to arrive. He'd been called a hero more times than he could remember. Soldiers trusted him. Families owed him everything. His chest carried medals that proved it, but medals don't silence nightmares. They don't fix trembling hands that can't hold a coffee cup without shaking. And they don't fill the empty space left when you come home from deployment only to watch the woman you love fade from cancer while you're still patching up strangers on the job. Jerome's wife, Lena, had been his anchor, his reason to keep fighting. When cancer stole her, the war in his head grew louder. He tried to keep working, tried to keep saving people, but the panic attacks came like ambushes. His hands shook when he needed them most. And the city, unforgiving as always, didn't wait for him to heal. When he lost his job, he thought the VA would catch him. But the VA had rules. Rules that twisted like barbed wire. No permanent address, no treatment, no treatment. No chance of finding stability. No stability, no address. It was a loop, a trap, and men like Jerome got caught in it until they disappeared. He pawned his medals to keep his storage unit, then lost the unit when he couldn't keep up the payments. The box with his wife's photos, his uniforms, his daughter's letters, gone, auctioned off to strangers. His daughter Aisha was grown now, a nurse herself, and she thought he was dead. He let her believe it. Better for her to remember the hero, not see the ghost he'd become. By the winter of that year, Jerome lived beneath an overpass, collecting cans by day, reading battered medical journals by night. Knowledge, he'd tell himself, doesn't expire. The streets called him Doc. He never corrected them. It was the only title he still carried with pride. And then came the night everything changed. The air was cold enough to sting. Jerome sat hunched outside a Wells Fargo building, his breath fogging the glass, staring at those $8 like they might multiply if he wished hard enough. His stomach cramped with hunger, sharp and unforgiving. He was debating whether to buy bread or stretch it with ramen when he saw movement across the street. A man in a tailored suit, $5,000 at least, stumbled from an alley. He was tall, powerful-looking, but in an instant his strength vanished. His knees buckled. He collapsed hard onto the sidewalk, his body jerking. The crowd swerved around him. Phones came out, screens lit up, but no one bent to help. People muttered excuses. Not my problem. He's probably drunk. Don't get involved, you'll get sued. But Jerome knew better. One look at the man's face and his medic instincts roared to life. The lips turning blue, the swelling, the wheeze like someone trying to breathe through a straw. This wasn't alcohol. This was anaphylaxis, a full-blown allergic reaction. Minutes left, maybe less. Jerome's pulse quickened. His hands, those same hands that trembled from trauma, suddenly steadied. Training took over. He checked the man's wrist. Yes, a medical bracelet. Severe peanut allergy. He searched the man's pockets, found the EpiPen case, but it was cracked, useless, the needle bent. The crowd just stared, recording as a stranger's life ticked away. Jerome looked up and saw salvation glowing across the street. Walgreens. He looked down at the $8 in his palm. $8 that meant survival for him, or life for the stranger. Without hesitation, Jerome ran. Past honking cars, past confused pedestrians, he burst through the Walgreens doors and slammed the money on the counter. "Generic EpiPen, now!" The pharmacist blinked, caught between company policy and urgency. "Sir, I need—" Jerome cut her off, voiced like a command in the middle of battle. "Every second you stall, this man's brain cells are dying." Something in his eyes, desperation, authority, pain, broke through her hesitation. She rang it up. $7.99. His last $8 gone in a flash. Jerome tore open the box as he sprinted back. The man's chest barely moved now. His skin was turning gray. The crowd widened their circle, phones still recording, narrating tragedy instead of stopping it. Jerome dropped to his knees, ripped through silk fabric, and drove the injector into the man's thigh. He counted, steady and low. 1, 2, 3. The crowd counted with him. 10 eternal seconds passed. Nothing. Then a faint gasp. Another. The man's chest rose. Color returned, slow but sure. The crowd erupted in cheers. Sirens wailed closer. EMTs rushed in, blinking as they recognized Jerome. He had trained some of them years ago, but Jerome didn't wait for applause. He stood, trembling, and melted into the shadows. Hungry, penniless, but carrying something in his chest he thought was gone forever. Purpose. What he didn't know was that the man he had just saved wasn't just anyone. He was Richard Sterling, the billionaire CEO of one of the largest pharmaceutical empires in the world. And the cameras hadn't just caught the rescue, they had captured every second of Jerome's sacrifice. By morning, the story was everywhere. News anchors spoke his name. Headlines screamed, "Homeless vet spends last $8 to save billionaire." Hashtags trended. Talk shows played the footage on loop. Overnight, Jerome became a national conversation. At a press conference, Richard Sterling faced cameras, his voice raw with emotion. He revealed the truth that had been hidden for years. "My company sells medicine for $800 that costs $8 to make. A man with nothing saved me with the truth." The crowd gasped. Then Sterling went further. He announced what he called the Caldwell Protocol, free medication for veterans, PTSD treatment centers across the country, and life-saving drugs sold at cost, not profit. The billionaire whose empire thrived on greed was publicly tearing it apart, all because a starving man with nothing but 8 crumpled bills had given them up to save him. But Jerome wasn't basking in the spotlight. He didn't see himself as a hero. He watched from a shelter, clutching his old EMT manual, trying to stay invisible. When Sterling finally found him, Jerome resisted. He didn't want pity. He didn't want charity. But Sterling wasn't offering that. He offered something else entirely: respect, redemption, and a way forward. And then he showed Jerome a video that shattered every wall he'd built. It was Aisha, Jerome's daughter. Her eyes were wet with tears, her voice breaking as she spoke into the camera. "Dad, please come home. I became a nurse because of you. You taught me that helping people matters. You're still that man." Jerome's knees gave out. For years he had carried shame, convinced his daughter was better off believing he was dead. Now here she was, begging for him to live again. Hours later, father and daughter found each other in the flesh. She ran into his arms, and the cameras captured it all. The $8 miracle had become a revolution. Within a year, Jerome stood not in the shadows but in Congress, testifying before lawmakers. No longer homeless, no longer broken, he was now Director Caldwell, speaking for thousands of veterans who finally had access to medication, treatment, and dignity. He looked senators in the eye and said, "What's unsustainable isn't the cost of medicine. What's unsustainable is 22 veterans killing themselves every single day." His voice didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. Behind him, screens lit up with charts, stories, faces of lives saved. The man who once starved under an overpass was now rewriting the rules of an entire industry. His daughter sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Richard Sterling, once humbled on a sidewalk, now took notes like a student. And veterans across the country called him what they always had. Doc 8 crumpled dollars had saved a billionaire, but more than that, they had saved Jerome himself. Because in the end, his grandmother had been right all along. Character is the only real currency. And for 4 minutes on a cold sidewalk, Jerome Caldwell had been the richest man in America.